bring it into the conversation with James, Paula, and Tom. But James, over to you. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you, Bradley, and indeed both of you. And Tom, I hasten to add that we will correct that the fact that you have not worked with us quite so often as Paula. We will be correcting that, although I never want to stop working with Paula. Indeed, I've often said, if only I could have a fest company. It was such a fantasy of mine all this time of running opera companies that I wanted the opportunity to have a group of artists on contract so that what you decided to do was, could be really scientific, a function of seeing what artists, how they can particularly distinguish themselves at this point in their career, how they can be most expressive, and how they have their most successful interaction with audiences, so that you can build on success in that way. I would love it. And then you also get to work with people that prepare. They come knowing the music. And that they bring something to the rehearsal room that's much more than you could have imagined in the first place. But anyway, I suppose we don't want to talk about fantasies all the time. I just want to talk about them most of the time. So we had a fantasy of a season this autumn, which was pretty ambitious. Operas by Turnage, Tippett, and Britten, and we can't do them. And that could be a terrible thing, and you could go crying forever. But I mean, we'll do them again, I hope. Life is long, and that was exciting. But I'm really hoping that we can do socially distanced performances this autumn of different rep, about which, to be honest, I'm totally excited. I've forgotten about the ones we were going to do. I'm completely excited about these because, it's a kind of a crummy situation. You have to say to a venue, well, what can we do for quite a small audience? Understanding that once you socially distance, you're not going to get so many people in. And theaters are thinking, sorry, box office, that's what we live for. And so I have a discussion with each one of them about how we can minimize costs and maximize distinctive and expressive performance. It gives, for me, like I'm getting to a shortcut here, it just gave me a chance to put together programs of things that I think are fantastic, completely fantastic, and rare, well, they will never have been performed together, and certainly never performed like this. And people won't know them all that well. So there's, to go out next autumn, I think people are going to need powerful motivation. It will not want to be something that they could see regularly or that they could see online. So we chose these monodramas. Obviously, we can rehearse them in a socially distanced fashion because we won't have very many people in the room. And we're thinking about unusual presentation styles for them. So on one night, there's going to be, this is the most, I suppose, traditional night. There's going to be the Poulenc Cocteau opera for soprano, meet Paula Sides, La Voix Humaine. So it's about the voice. We'll discuss this further. I mean, he wrote it for a favorite singer of his. And of course, Cocteau, the word tells you that it's an interesting drama. And it's magnificently set. So this is for soprano and orchestra, and we'll be performing it for soprano and piano. Happily, that is no kind of reduction because Poulenc wrote so beautifully for piano, and he was really one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century. So the piano, and I've directed it with piano before, it's a different experience. Kind of wonderful because you're not struggling to hear what she's saying, as you always do when there's a full orchestra and just one soprano, but has a different quality, and the dynamic between the pianist and the singer is a big thing. Anyway, it's on a double bill in our plan with another piece by Dominic Argento, an American composer, which is musically in an utterly different world, 20th century. He's a really good composer of lyric drama. And this one is called A Waterbird Talk. And it's an illustrated lecture on the mating habits of waterfowl. And as he discusses the mating habits of waterfowl, you realize that he is talking about his marriage and his domestic life. That it's a lighter piece. It's quite sad, but it's a lighter piece than the Why Men. I think they're great companions. We have the option of doing them together if we can do a standard theatre night, or they're about equal length, and they're what I would call modular units. So if, say, we can't do anything indoors, we'll try to look for a place where we can do a 45-minute show outdoors. Now, obviously that means September, and we have been planning on October, November, but you leave the logistics to me. I have to deal with those problems. So they can be separate or they can be together. Together, they make quite an interesting comment on each other, but they don't impose on each other. Now, the other evenings are their song cycles that we're going to stage. Now, we're not going to have sheep or make up a story or link the song cycles in any way. Not at all. I mean, every time a singer performs a song cycle, they are staging it. Every recital artist has a different dramatic style in the presentation of song. You know, many of you will be familiar with the kind of Wigmore code, which is highly esteemed for presenting song. It's a perfectly good one. It has, in a way, excluded so many others. So what we will do is create characters who sing these songs. Some of them are going to be directed and accompanied by dancer choreographers. I think 3 will be in that situation. Others will be straightforwardly directed, and there will be just the singer on stage and the pianist. And in others, 1 or 2 of the other singers performing that night will be on stage as physical presences during the song cycle. So let me just give you the names so that you can get excited. I'm going to do program 3 first of all, and then go back to program 2. So program 3 has the, program 3 is the one that actually has more dance. And for me, it's focused on poetry, relationship between poetry and the body and music. So it's the Benjamin Britten Songs and Proverbs it's not Songs and Proverbs, bless us and save us, the Holy Sonnets of John Donne. Then 2 Tippett song cycles, we hope. Certainly Tippett, The Heart's Assurance, which I hope we'll talk about in a little bit more detail with Tom. The most extraordinary poetry by Alan Lewis and Sidney Keys, 2 young men who died in the Second War. So while it's a response to the death by suicide of Tippett's close friend, Francesca Allinson, it's an absolutely fearless and deeply sexy look at love in time of war. The other Tippett songs, the other Tippett song cycle is actually setting up a prose text by W.H. Hudson called Boyhood's End. You would expect this of Tippett. It's sensuality distilled. And I have to say, I think it's one of the greatest musical statements about desire I can imagine. It is ecstatic. It's what you lose when you are no longer a boy, when you become a man, conjuring that in sensuous imagery. It's set in the Pampas in Argentina. Could hardly be more exotic. And then also on that program, so those are all works for tenor. And then for mezzo-soprano, the Benjamin Britten Charm of Lullabies. And you hear lullaby and you think, oh, that'll be sweet. Well, yeah, there's an element of sweetness, but it's not your everyday lullabies. It's very accessible among the of the things that we'll be performing that evening. But it's I have a particular idea for a staging, which is it's as much about visual art, because this one is not danced, as it is about song. And then another, which is just a great favorite of mine that I don't even know if it's ever been performed in the UK. It's settings of the poetry of Marina Tsvetaeva by Shostakovich. And Shostakovich was, of course, a friend and contemporary of Britain. They met a number of times and responded to each other in their music. And Tsvetaeva, I mean, we were talking about her poetry, she just blows you away. She cuts to the vein in the first line of each of her poems. Really so exciting. I remember when first I heard this, I went off and read everything of Tsvetaeva in English. And came away, I was sharing this anecdote, came away thinking, well, if I don't die first, I want to do one thing in life, which is make a film about one of her poems called The Poem of the End, which is set on the Charles Bridge in Prague about the end of an affair. Not about it, I want to make a film of it. So making a film of a poem, that would be the challenge. Anyway, I'm not doing that, can't do it, so what the hell. So that's on one night, and dancing in that evening will be Fergus O'Cahur, who's a really interesting guy who has had his own company here, and lately he's just left the National Youth Dance Theatre of Wales, where he was the artistic director. But he made a most extraordinary piece last year about Roger Casement, if any of you know the political figure Roger Casement, who's, well, a very particular figure. And it was performed on beaches around Ireland and I think also in the UK. So that's that night. And I'm going to test Bradley when I describe the second night, because I'm going to list 3 of the items in the second night, and he has to tell me the fourth because it's gone out of my head, even though it's very close to my heart. But many things that are close to my heart go out of my head, sadly. I'm sure people don't like that. Anyway, with Britain in poetry, again, it's the Songs and Proverbs of William Blake. And that's being sung by baritone Julian van Mellerts, who really knows this piece off by heart and in his head. Blake, of course, that extraordinary visionary, well, that's almost a cliche to say he was visionary, but uncategorizable poet. And at the far end of the program for soprano, Jenny Stafford, will be the Benjamin Britten setting of The Poet's Echo, which is some really beautiful, tough poems by Pushkin, of course, the poet who wrote Eugene Onegin, and many of you will know that opera. But Pushkin's poetry, he was very preoccupied with who is listening. So the piece will visually be about the act of listening. And what is the audience for poetry? What is the audience for song and for music? It's a preoccupation of mine. Who is the audience? Who is the audience in the mind of the performer? With whom is this conversation being held? Is it polite serried ranks at Wigmore Hall? Or is it less polite, more chaotic people who are actually responding in some way? Because the poet Pushkin tries to imagine what would be the reply. He yearns for a reply from the listener in the most compelling and passionate way. So they're wonderful songs. They were written when Britain made a trip to Armenia, and he met up with Galina Vishnevskaya and Gennady Rozhdestensky, and he wrote those songs for Vishnevskaya. And you can just hear her sing them. Of course, she recorded it. And then the one that came to me first is the Shostakovich, again, Romances on English Poetry. I remember hearing that on an LP when I was a teenager. It's written for bass, and it's going to be sung by Ed Hawkins, who is a real bass. For those of you who got to see Giulio Cesare, he was singing Aquila in the last season. And he's a real bass, and he's about 6'7" or 8". He's a strong presence and great guy. And this is it's a setting of poems by 3 poems of Robbie Burns, a Shakespeare sonnet, Chesterton, an anonymous poem. They're so dark. They're so dark that it actually makes you feel good. Do you know the way if somebody's just halfway dark, something's halfway dark, ooh, it can be quite depressing. But these they go the limit. And we are talking again about 1940s. So we have a staging for that. If I can just tell you that it involves a refrigerator and may or may not involve snakes. But, you can take that image out of your mind now and return to contentment. What's the other one, Bradley, on that night?
Well, I think those are the three that you've sort of settled on. The other option that had been talked about was the songs of travel.
No.
But that's gone now.
Yes, it's gone now, but there's another one in that evening. Anyway, I'm sure, isn't that awful? It's because I've been doing something else for the last 3.5 hours. So we've got these 3 different nights, and we can also take them apart and do them in smaller pieces. And it's my plan to film some of them and to make them proper films, not recording a live thing, but a proper film of something, which will call on different skills from the artists involved. And so apart from Paula and Tom, I mentioned Ed Hawkins, and I didn't mention Katie Stevenson, the wonderful mezzo. I'm hoping she's going to be able to join us. It just depends on the dates. And also lovely Richard. Oh my God, how can this happen to me? Richard Dowling, he's going to sing the John Donne poems. And he's just got the right mind for them. He's absolutely got the right, it's a beautiful voice, and one's not hearing that song, one's not used to hearing that song cycle sung beautifully. It's usually sung, I would say, athletically. But Richard sings everything with beauty. So this will be a new thing, even in terms of recordings of it. But also he has a spiritual dialogue going on in him that I think will connect with, understand the John Donne poems. Well, even if he doesn't understand them, he'll make you think about them. I think he'll make you feel something, it's of course the project, isn't it? As indeed will Paula and Tom. So I just propose that we concentrate on 2 of the items, if that's okay. And we can, of course, have questions on any of the other items. But if we concentrate on 2 of them, and we can go back and forth. But Paula, whoever directs you in La Voix Humaine, is certainly going to have, and it probably will end up being me, because I have such strong feelings about the piece. There will be a bed.
Yes.
There will be a bed, there will be a telephone, and there will be a giant rusty circular saw blade gradually lowering toward the bed in the course of the 45 minutes. And I hope there will be a sudden slip so the blade comes down very quickly at the extraordinary moment when you realize that your lover, to whom you're talking on the phone throughout, and he's ending the affair, when you realize that he's lying to you. Not about ending the affair, but about where he is and who he's with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the most powerful moment, when everything shifts in her world. It shifts and she just goes, oh my God, he's not home and he's not coming home. And this man is, I don't know who he is.
You don't know who he is, and you love him.
Exactly.
There is no doubt that you love him.
You don't care.
Well, we've all loved people we didn't know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're lucky if we get out of it.
I think that's what's nice about it. James, it gives hope. It gives hope to all of us. The fact that it is really difficult to end relationships that are unhealthy. And how many times have we experienced or watched our friends experience relationships that are infatuations, powerful, strong, like drugs, and yet you cannot find a way out. You will lie to yourself. You will continue to imagine that no, it's different, and he isn't this way, but then you eventually survive it, but you have to find a way.
I mean, who's she to talk about him lying? She spends her whole evening saying that she's got a friend calling around, she's all dressed up, she's cheerful, which is absolutely not the case. I mean, lying, it's not what do you call, like a polarity, is it?
No.
She's telling the truth by saying what isn't the case.
I think this is true, that also in relationships that necessarily are infatuations and strong and powerful, you present a certain sense of self anyway, a persona that you think that they will like, and you don't end up ever being yourself at your most vulnerable. And isn't that a very sad point, that she finally, because she realized that he was lying, she was able to be the most vulnerable in order to extricate herself. I think that was a moment of, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm going to be honest, because I have lost him. And now I'm going to lay myself bare. I'm going to show it all the ugly stuff. And it's just, and her truth comes out, doesn't it? Her truth, her vulnerability pours out. And then it's okay to say goodbye, even though it's awful.
It's awful and okay. I mean, it's cauterizing, isn't it? You see someone cauterizing a wound. And what a challenge to do a 45-minute piece, just you and a phone and a pianist and an audience, in terms of concentration. I mean, I can see there's questions come up. Do you think she survives? Poulenc is absolutely clear about it. He says so. She does. There's a weird thing where she wraps a telephone wire around her neck, and a lot of people, rather sentimentally, take that to indicate that she's going to kill herself, which is absolutely stated is not the case, that she's a young and attractive woman and she will have other relationships.
Yes.
She will live. It makes it no less grave, however. Yes. I mean, surviving is the hard bit.
I completely agree. I think we were just talking about the feeling, the entrapment of, and the power of words and passion, and how they seem to hold you, and it being a sexual power that you have in a relationship. I think that does not take away her ability to move on and have other relationships. And I think it leaves a mark, definitely. But I think Poulenc does like strong women, and often sets music of poets like Louise de Villemorin, of women who survive loss, who survive passion, who live it, enjoy it. I think Poulenc like that about Duval as well, who he wrote for. He loved her life. I mean, she was, she had amazing relationships, and he loved that about her, and her passion in relationships that maybe didn't turn out very well, but she still lived to sing about it,
I can't believe anybody would have heard her, though. I mean, the voice was penetrating, but rather slender. It was really a music hall artist. I mean, I know she created the role in Dialogues of the Carmelites as well, but the band is big. I remember the first time doing La Voix Humaine, we did it on piano and with piano on tour, and we did it with orchestra, and this was in Dublin. And holy cow, I mean, it's beautiful to listen to, but what a racket to try and hear the soprano over. Nearly impossible.
The brass is just
on the same level. Yeah.
No, I think with piano it's perfect. I think it's better with piano, to be honest, because just like his because the writing is so good for piano, so much intimacy and vulnerability with the piano, and you can do more intimate sounds that are more realistic for some of the things she says, and the frustration and the pain. You have a more breadth of color there, especially, and my God, what a challenge for the pianist. Wow.
well, it's good of you to think it's a challenge for the pianist. He's got a score in front of him, or she's got a score in front of him. You don't. there's quite a big challenge. And you have to make the big shape. But you also have this wonderful opportunity for playing with the eroticism of the voice. You know, that's why the visual symbol of the telephone cord, remember that they would have been not curly, they would have been flat when this was written, wrapped around the neck. It's to wrap his voice around your throat. How warm and sexual and sad, yes. It's certainly sad that she's looking for the vibrations in the cord around her neck to take the place of the absent body. But what makes the best poetry is always absence, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, absence and yearning.
I think I love the thing when she lets her image slip that she's trying to tell him, and she says, you know, I have to get used to sleeping alone.
But what's great also is the audience hears that and they think, I'm there with you.
Yeah.
So, you know, it invites the audience in an outrageous way, as lover, as rival, as sympathizer. And I may be going a bit mad here, but I think it eroticizes the audience. And gosh, I pay money for that. Yeah.
I saw it, I think I saw it 10 years ago. And I wished that it was done with piano, to be quite honest, because I heard it with recordings with orchestra, but it was quite a complicated production. And I've seen ones that are kind of complicated and overly fussy. And it's a shame because it's in the words, isn't it? It's in what she says. Everything is, it's like the conversation that at the end of every relationship you wish that you had, that sometimes you don't get to have. That is, it is the time when you're able to say it all. You discover the truth, you discover this is not right. He is lying to me. And then you realize, I want something more. And and now I'm just going to say what I need to say. And oftentimes you don't get a chance to do that. And I think it's beautiful the way that Poulenc allows that time. And as an audience, I think it's powerful because you want to have that time, you know, as an audience as well, in relationships and closure, and which is how I think I empathized with it as well.
You know, it's a challenge for a director in the same way, well, not in the same way as something like Bluebeard's Castle, because that, after all, is a dialogue. And it's in a way much more, being a dialogue, it's more naturally theatrical. But, you know, these soliloquies that we'll be doing, monodramas, they have the possibility of the intimacy of radio. And, well, because I'm the kind of person who doesn't sleep, and I put on the radio when I can't sleep, that intimacy of a voice in my ear is usually so much more persuasive and powerful than anything I ever see in the theatre. That there's a real challenge for the visual representation of this, not to compromise the absolutely pure line between the voice and the listener. It's a challenge to make it, I mean, that is so much already, voice to listener, that adding to it is perilous, exciting and perilous. You can so often get it wrong, you know, by a lot of frittering, a lot of jumping about, a lot of hysterics, you know, so that the woman alienates you within the first 10 minutes, and then think, Jesus, no wonder he's leaving her. Holy cow, why didn't he get out sooner?
I know. It's like, oh God, you know, I know. It's like, wow, someone needed to have a little beverage maybe before it called. You know, you want her to be the way we all are when you're in your pajamas and you're waiting by the phone, wanting the person to call, and you're not kind of hysterical. You're trying to be the person that they want you to be, or him seeing the way you're trying to create this world in a relationship. And
a world where you want and you're not wanted. It's
exactly.
difficult to look your best. I have.
You wouldn't shower, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you would hit the drugs. I think the you might hit the sleeping pills a bit, as is mentioned, but you wouldn't necessarily be snorting the cocaine, if you know what I mean. So,
well, I have to assure you all, you will feel better at the end of this, and you don't necessarily have to bring along any of those little helps that Paula has suggested. I want to just ask Tom about, is it okay if we focus a bit on the Heart's Assurance? Because I know you've sung that in the past. I was cheating during my course this afternoon, and I had another screen up, which was those poems, because I just wanted to reread them. They're so great. I don't even know what some of them mean, and they're so great. But that stuff, that's majorly erotic, isn't it? The image of the woman dancing on the grave of her dead lover, and of course now she's paid to dance. That exhortation: remember your lovers, who somehow in the worst scenes of war and bloodshed took you to something else. There's no idealization of love, and yet there's an almighty estimate of its power. It seems that love's stronger than death.
It's interesting that you chose to pair it with the Boyhood's End, which was written about 5 or 6 years before Heart's Assurance, and I didn't know Boyhood's End before you spoke to me about it so well. But as you said, I have sung Heart's Assurance before. Firstly, when I was at university, so about 12 years ago, and I put the last two in my final recital because I thought they were great songs, without knowing how difficult they are as pieces of music, and texturally and vocally it's a real challenge, and the piano part's a nightmare. It was written for Britain, and after the first performance, which was at the Festival of Britain, different spelling of course, Britain said, I will never play that again, it's too difficult. Which says something about, he was a fantastic pianist, but Tippett, it seems, had more confidence with his sort of fight with love and with his own emotion. And in Boyhood's End, it's somebody else's thoughts on a loss of innocence at the age of 15. Hudson's looking back and saying, what did I want? I wanted everything to stay the same, actually. And we sort of feel that Tippett felt the same. And by the time the Heart's Assurance, which is not that long later, he sort of settled into being more possibly angry and upset at what he's been dealt with in terms of his sort of the complexion of his emotions, I think. It's dedicated to Francesca Allison, who took her own life, and some think that she took her own life because Tippett's feelings for her were not what her feelings were for him. And actually, that was in 1940 she took her life, and this is 10 years later, and it feels like a journey through Tippett's relationship with Francesca Allison in many ways, I think. And as you say, it's ecstatic and sensual, and it's also very dark and very, it's a real challenge. Sort of the piano part is difficult, but it's very restless, and you don't have any moment of silence really until the fifth song, the final song in the cycle, and suddenly you get the tenor sings on his own. Young men, remember your lovers. and that comes back 3 or 4 times. And it's like the call at the battle, or the bugle call, and I'm sure that that's on purpose. It's a very sort of war association that he creates with that section, but it's the first time that the pianist is not involved. It sort of feels like Tippett's saying, I've been through all these emotions and this journey through sensuality, but actually alone, without the person I wanted to explore those with, but couldn't ever give myself to in Francesca Allison. So it's over 20 minutes. It's an incredible journey. And it feels very autobiographical, even though it's these 2 different poets, Keyes and Lewis. I struggle a bit with both pieces in terms of the text. As you say, some of it's quite hard to understand. And The Boyhood's End is very dense. And it
What a minute pause is there? I initially approached Fergus about Boyhood's End, about dancing to that, and he just said, I can't find any space.
Yeah.
It's so solid, it's so packed, it's so detailed. So I was unsurprised then that he went for the Marina Tsvetaeva, which has much more space. But another dancer, Bernadette Iglich, will be making a movement performance on The Heart's Assurance.
Right.
With Richard, actually, because she enjoys working with him, with Richard Dowling, the tenor. So he'll have finished his John Donne poems, so he can be used physically on stage thereafter. That doesn't sound very good. But I actually, I sent off for the collected poems of Alan Lewis and the collected poems of Sidney Keyes afterwards. They're really very extraordinary. Together with Keith Douglas, who I've always thought of as the greatest of the Second World War poets. They're really very remarkable. And Keyes was no age, 21. Lewis a little bit older. Remarkable artists. And it's funny you say that it's a reflection of the life of I guess it must have been for Tippett a reflection on his relationship with Francesca Allinson. But because I deliberately have, I read about that in Tippett's biography years ago, but I deliberately didn't go back to revisit that because I thought, actually, I don't care. What interests me is the words he's chosen and how he set them to music and the difficulties he has deliberately presented to the singer.
Yeah.
And the challenge he sets in terms of singing lyrically. I think I mentioned to you that I'd only ever heard Boyhood's End sung by people who sounded like they were being technically challenged by it. Well, for example, Peter Pears. And it's accomplished and unbeautiful. And then when I heard Stanford Olson sing it only on YouTube, that American Rossini tenor, who just has the most fantastic technique and great access to the top, which Pears didn't have. So a lot of confidence there. And no trouble in that tricky place at the top of the stave, where you don't have any trouble either, Tom. I realized, oh gosh, he meant this to be sung beautifully. He deliberately put difficulties there, and that's the weird thing about Tippett. He didn't have the, I don't know, I think he didn't have the technical fluency of Britain to make things easier, but he knew that, and he made a virtue of it. So all of the difficulty has a point.
It's funny you mentioned the Rossini tenor thing, because some of the songs, The Dancer, especially in The Heart's Assurance, it could have been written by Rossini in a different age. You hear some of the movement, and it's like he's got a Rossini, a sort of leggero tenor in mind. But then other songs are so different in terms of suitability for a voice. I don't hear Pears in that piece at all. Partly because the first person I heard do it was John Mark Ainsley, who's very different colour-wise to what Pears had. And
I guess
actually,
Purcell was the model, wasn't it? Purcell is the one musical spirit that you hear across all the songs.
yeah. And funny enough, Boyhood's End it's written as one piece, but it's four quite distinct sections and quite sort of similar structurally to how Purcell would.
Sorry, I don't know how it goes either. I wasn't alive then, so I don't know what they said.
No, indeed. Whereas I feel actually that the Heart's Assurance feels more like one piece, but it's split into 5 songs. It's funny how that should happen.
Yes, when Boyhood's End begins and just doesn't stop. But I got to say, for anybody, all of you there, if you YouTube, have a listen to Stanford Olson singing this. It's a revelation. He's such a great singer. And he stands there. He looks to me like a Bible salesman. And he sort of presents himself that way too. But it's got this heartbreaking honesty. Oh, it's just, in terms of a singer presenting song, I think it's a sort of masterclass, quite apart from the singing. And if we're lucky enough to do Boyhood's End on this program, I mean, it's quite an ask for the audience to concentrate on this much poetry, let alone this much poetry set to music. And some Tippett specialist said to me, "Oh no, you mustn't. You simply mustn't. You mustn't do Boyhood's End and the Heart's Assurance. I mean, it's asking far too much of your audience." And I just kind of thought, well, there's only going to be a couple of hundred of them. Let's ask a lot of them, because I mean, you got to make it special if you're going to get people to come out this autumn. And if you are going to go out, you want something to be asked of you. You want something to happen. I would imagine, because I think we're going to have to talk people into going outside of their homes in the autumn, if the theatres are open for us to present this. And if they're not, well, then we're jolly well going to rehearse them, I hope, and film them and do them again. But, you know, make them part of you. We're an opera company. We have to make work. We have to make work. And people need that. They don't need records of old shows. Well, I mean, they're very nice if you're into that kind of thing, but they need new things being made. I think I feel like that's what we get our money for. So that's what we've got to do.
James, we have just a comment from Ruth and David. If we're making films of these pieces, will we also film the live event as well to be put out there, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about filming live events and then putting them out on one of these pay-to-view websites. So we might do that, because it is quite important that we start to monetize the work that artists make that's put online. It's just not great that we're assuming, it sort of suggests that their artistry is a hobby. And it's not a hobby. They've trained long and hard. They're the best I know. They're going to make something rich, personal, and individual. So I think we've got to find a way to not just cast it forward, you know, and we'll take advice about that and work at it. I mean, I'm thinking, well, maybe we probably won't be able to film it all well, but maybe if we can film, I'm told that online people want to see things that are short. So, you know, up to 20 minutes, or maybe 45 for the big shows, but I think it's more likely to be for the song cycles, you know, to see the Heart's Assurance on its own, lit and staged, with the dancer, Boyhood's End on its own, the extraordinary settings of John Donne's Holy Sonnets, which was Britain's response to his visit to Belsen after the war. There is a theme in these, and that's in a lot of them, and that's connection to that period of the Second War. Not all of them, obviously, but very many of them, which was extremely influential in Shostakovich's output, and his responses are various and rich. And then Tippett was making his response, course, Tippett was a conscientious objector who was briefly imprisoned for people tried to get him out of it, but he wanted to take that stand. And then Britain, who had gone to America during the war, was taken on a trip to Belsen thereafter. And well, I think what you see in those Donne poems is the visceral attachment of the voice to well, to God, to some idea of what it is to be human, some sense of why you keep going post Belsen. What's the strong thing that makes you still connect after an experience like that? And that wrestling, I think Britain rather cleverly found evidenced in the poems of John Donne, which are at first, you know, the thing is you should all see them 5 times, because if you don't know them, the first time you hear them, you think, bloody hell, that's difficult. And they get so much richer on every other hearing. But, you know, music should be like that. I mean, who thinks that they can look at a painting the first time and understand everything? You go back, you know, it's a cumulative experience. It's, and I'm hoping that what we can do on some of these nights of where we're mixing Shostakovich and Britain and Pushkin and Blake, that in a way one piece will guide you into the next piece and enrich. I mean, and don't think that we're going to go crazy with visual things because I said about a fridge and snakes. Anyway, you can't get snakes. But even lighting someone very beautifully listening on stage is extremely theatrical. It's nearly more potent than people, you know, doing headstands and, you know, props and juggling and trying to keep you amused. I think anyway, I come to that position now.
We've got just a couple of comments here. One from Jill, who says, I hope you can bring Britain to Suffolk, of course. She says, if the Red House Garden, perhaps if Snape cannot open, which could be really interesting.
Whether, yes, I'd love, that would be a good thing. But I know Snape really wants this. The Maltings, they really want to present it. Indeed, all the theatres that we had engaged for the operas want it. And a number of other ones. I've been surprised. But I think they want something special to say to their audience, we're still alive and thinking and, you know, still full of desire. So I know Roger's very keen on it in Snape, and fingers are crossed. It's a nice big hall with lots of easy access, and it should be quite possible to socially distance there, I would have thought.
Before if anyone's got any more questions, then do put them in the chat. I know that our development officer, Catherine Bench, is here. And Catherine, do you want to say hello to our supporters who might be watching? I know they'd like to hear from you if you're there. Maybe she's not there.
Bradley,
hello,
something we should do before Catherine comes. I think we should send everybody a reading list after this.
Yeah.
So they can have all the poems that will be presented, all the texts, and where we think that they're available. I mean, you'll have to pinch them. You know, I know for the Heart's Assurance, I'm still reading photographs I took of a really beautiful recording that Philip Langridge made of the text. But you'll be able to sort it out. We'll send you out a reading list and you can source it. We don't have to source it for you.
Are you there, Catherine?
Yeah, I was sitting so comfortably and I couldn't find the unmute button. Yes, so hello everyone. For those who don't know me, my name's Catherine Bench and I'm the Development Officer at English Touring Opera. And as part of my role, I manage our supporters scheme and hold a close relationship with with our supporters, many of you here today, and who have been so engaged with the conversation. It's lovely to see the community here. And thank you for your continued support and generosity as well, especially during this bizarre and tricky time. If you'd like to know more about how you can get closer to our work, whether that's supporting us or becoming one of our volunteers or anything like that, please do not hesitate to get in contact with me, and I'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you. You can find my email on the website. But Bradley, I think.
Or if you've got ideas about where we can do it, if you've got ideas about places
Absolutely.
where we can do some of these, or part of them, or half an hour, or one, I think we have to be really open to all possibilities for the ways of presenting this. And the best thing we can get are ideas from people around the country who might even say, I know this place where they don't normally do performances, but I know how it could be done, and I've always wanted to see something done there. Or I would like to see it done at lunchtime, because I'll feel much better about going out in the daytime. And, just one 45-minute piece, something like that. I feel like a bit of a failure here, because I was hoping that I would get Paula and Tom onto the subject of eroticism in words and music. That would be quite a good conversation for everyone, but I just got so excited about all the eroticism myself, I didn't let anybody else pipe up.
Well, maybe what we should do is give everyone the reading list, and then maybe invite everyone back next week to talk about it. But it's been thanks everyone for coming. There's actually going to be a little poll for you at the end of this Zoom, which is basically just a few questions about the In Conversation With for you, and also just one question about coming to the theatre during this time. But thank you, Paula, so much for joining us today. Thank you to Tom as well. It's great to have you both with us. And thank you to you, James. And have a really lovely week, everyone. It's quite gloomy here this evening, but go and maybe not where James is. Have a lovely evening.
James.
Oh, is he going to show us? Yeah, James.
Oh, man.
James has escaped to Italy. But the poll's just coming now, so if you could do that, I'd be very grateful. It's anonymous, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Goodbye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.